Welcome back, guys. Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family also. Can you please tell me from where you're watching? Thanks. The house on Elder Lane. Okay, so this happened back in 2017 when I was 12. It was early June, right when school had just let out for the summer, and I was spending the weekend at my cousin Max's place in a small town called Elmswood. Not much ever happened there. Just a quiet little neighborhood surrounded by woods and old streets that all looked the same. It was one of those warm Friday nights where the air feels thick and bugs hover around the porch light. Max's parents were out for the night, so it was just me, Max, his best friend Benny, and their neighbor Luca. We were camped out in the living room with a bunch of snacks, watching some old horror movie none of us were really paying attention to. We were mostly talking over it, tossing popcorn at each other and arguing about which horror villain would win in a fight. Then Benny, who was always the loud one, goes, "Hey, what about that house next door?" We all stopped. Even the movie suddenly seemed quieter. "You mean the gray one with the boarded-up windows?" Max asked. "Yeah," Benny said, leaning forward. "The one people say used to belong to the guy who disappeared. My sister says she saw a light on upstairs last week." We all kind of laughed it off at first. I mean, every town has that one creepy house, right? The one people whisper about, but no one really knows the truth. In Elmswood, it was the house on Elder Lane, right next to Max's backyard. It looked like it hadn't been lived in for decades. The paint was peeling off the siding. The front steps were sagging, and the windows had those thick old curtains that never moved. But then Benny kept going. "I dare us to go inside just for a minute. Come on, don't be babies." Max rolled his eyes. "We're not going into that place. My mom would kill me." "Your mom's not even here," Lucas said, smirking. "Besides, what if we find something cool?" I could feel this weird twist in my stomach, like I knew it was a bad idea but also didn't want to be the one who said no, so we waited. Max's parents weren't due back for hours. Around 11:30, when the house was quiet and dark, we grabbed Max's flashlight, snuck out through the back door, and crossed the yard toward the fence that separated their house from the one next door. There was a loose board in the fence we squeezed through. Right away, the air felt different, heavy, still. The grass was overgrown and wet with dew, and I swear it got colder the second we stepped onto the other property. The back door of the house was slightly open, just enough to slip through. I creaked when Max pushed it. That sound, it echoed way longer than it should have. Inside, everything smelled like damp wood and something sour, like old garbage that had been sitting too long. The floors were covered in dust, but there were footprints already there. Not ours. The flashlight beam jumped across cracked wallpaper, broken picture frames, and furniture covered in white sheets. We walked down a long hallway that had doors on either side. One of them slowly creaked open by itself when we passed. Benny jumped about a foot in the air and almost dropped the flashlight. "Just the air," Max said, not sounding convinced. The hallway ended in a narrow staircase. We climbed it slowly. Each step groaned like it hadn't been touched in years. At the top was another hallway, darker than the first. There were 3 doors, 2 on the left, 1 on the right. We opened the first door on the left. It was empty, just a few broken shelves and a shattered mirror. The second door on the left was locked, so we moved to the door on the right. When Max turned the knob, it opened with a low, moaning squeak. Inside was a bedroom. It didn't look destroyed like the rest of the house. In fact, it looked weirdly clean. The floor wasn't dusty. The bed was neatly made with a thin gray blanket. There was a small wooden table and a single chair. On the table was a folded map and something that looked like a journal. But what really got our attention were the photos. Dozens of them. They were spread out all over the floor like someone had thrown them there in a hurry. When we picked them up, our stomachs dropped. They were photos of us, from different times. Some were from school, others from the park down the street, but some were taken inside Max's house. One showed Max sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal. Another showed Benny on the couch in his living room. None of us remembered anyone taking those. My skin went cold. I wanted to leave right then. Max grabbed the map and unfolded it. Our names were written in tiny letters at different spots. Our houses, our bus stops, even the short trail we sometimes took through the woods. Next to each name were notes, times we left our homes, who we walked with, what we usually wore. It's like someone's been following us, Luca whispered. Then Benny pointed to the corner. What's that? It was an old camcorder sitting on a tripod. The red light was blinking. It was on. And recording. We didn't say a word. Max stuffed the map into his hoodie pocket and we turned to leave. But just before we stepped into the hallway, we heard something upstairs. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. We froze. Then Luca said, "We need to go. Now." We rushed downstairs, nearly falling over each other. The house groaned like it was waking up. Doors creaked. Something banged behind us. I swear I heard whispering coming from the walls. We burst out the back door, ran across the yard, and didn't stop until we were back in Max's living room, slamming the door shut and locking every bolt. Nobody said a thing. We just stood there, staring at each other. Max unfolded the map on the coffee table again. The handwriting was small and neat, too neat, like someone had practiced it. "We have to tell someone," I finally said. Max picked up the phone and called the police. He told them everything. They said they'd send someone over. About 15 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. We let them in and showed them the map and told them about the photos, the camcorder, everything. They nodded, took the map, and said they'd go check out the house. We waited in silence while they were gone. 20 minutes passed. When they came back, they looked confused. They said the house was empty, no camcorder, no photos. They found the table and chair, but the bed was stripped and the floor was dusty again, like no one had stepped in there for years. Max asked if they were sure. The older cop shrugged. "Nothing there but old furniture. Are you boys sure you weren't imagining things?" We weren't. We knew what we saw, but without any proof, the cops said there wasn't much they could do. They gave us a look that said, "You kids watched too many movies," and left. None of us could sleep that night. We stayed in the living room with the lights on, staring at the front door like something might come through it. Every time a branch scratched the window or the fridge made a noise, we jumped. When the sun finally came up, we grabbed our stuff and got ready to leave. As I was putting on my shoes, I looked out the window. The house next door looked totally normal. Same as always, but I knew it wasn't. Not anymore. We never went near that house again. No one talked about it after that night, not even Max. It was like we all agreed to forget, but I didn't. I still have nightmares about those photos, about that red blinking light. And sometimes when I'm walking home alone, I swear I feel someone watching me. And that map, the one with our names and routines, it was never seen again. Have you ever had one of those nights where something just doesn't feel right? Like everything looks normal, but deep down your gut telling you to run? Yeah. This was one of those nights. It happened back in 2017 in a quiet little place called Maple Hollow. Not much ever happened there. It's the kind of town where everyone knows each other's dogs by name, and if you sneeze on your front porch, 3 neighbors will shout, "Bless you," before you even grab a tissue. Real safe. Real quiet. Real boring. Until that night. I was 24 then, and I worked the late shift at a bakery warehouse 2 towns over. Not exactly glamorous, but hey, it paid the bills. I'd usually get off around 11:30 or midnight and drive the same sleepy road back home. My parents lived out in the suburbs and I was crashing with them for a bit. My best friend Lacey lived 2 blocks down, and we'd talk almost every night to keep each other company during our weird work hours. She'd just started graveyard shifts at the hospital. So anyway, it was a Thursday night, technically Friday morning, and I pulled into our driveway a little before 1 a.m. The sky was this deep navy blue, just short of pitch black, and the stars were doing their thing. You know how sometimes the night feels thick, like it's heavier than it should be? That's how it felt. I left the engine running for a minute and stayed in the car, chatting with Lacey on the phone, just winding down. I wasn't in a rush. The street was dead quiet. Most houses were completely dark, except for the Willis place 2 doors down where Mr. Willis was probably watching his weird UFO documentaries again. He never sleeps. I was mid-laugh about some dumb meme Lacey had sent when I saw it. Just a flicker in the corner of my eye. There was someone walking down the sidewalk on the other side of the street. Now, that might not sound creepy, but here's the thing. In Maple Hollow, nobody goes for strolls at 1 in the morning. It's not a, let me walk my dog real quick kind of place. And this person wasn't walking a dog. They weren't even walking like a person with somewhere to go. They were just drifting. Real slow. Real weird. I stopped talking mid-sentence and whispered, "Lacey, there's someone out there." "Out where?" she asked, suddenly all serious. "Outside. Across the street. They're just walking." "What do you mean just walking? Like a neighbor?" "I don't know. They're moving slow. Kinda aimless. It's weird." I peeked into my side mirror, trying not to make it obvious. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The person had a light. Not a little phone flashlight. This thing was bright. Like way too bright for a phone. It was bluish white and steady. No flicker, no bouncing like someone carrying it while walking. It looked like a spotlight, but smaller. And here's the part that still makes my skin crawl. The second they got across from my car, they stopped. They didn't check their phone, didn't tie their shoe. They just stopped. Like they were waiting for something. Or someone. The light they had, it started to rise, slowly, smoothly, like it was on a rail or something. No shaking, no hesitation. It moved up, 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 and then locked in, right on my side mirror. The light hit it at this perfect angle, bounced off, and shot straight into my face. I couldn't see them, but I knew they could see me. I ducked down in my seat a little. "Lacey, they're shining a light into my mirror. It's hitting my face. Are you serious?" "Lock the doors." "I already did, I think." "Hold on." I reached for my keys, but my hands were trembling. I dropped them between the seat and the console and had to feel around in that awful crack while trying not to completely lose it. All I could think was, don't look up. Don't look up. Because I knew if I looked again, that light would be closer. Maybe they'd be right next to the window, maybe they'd be staring in. Finally, I got the keys. My fingers barely worked, but I jammed them in, started the car, and peeled out of the driveway like a bat out of hell. As I turned the corner at the end of the street, I glanced into my rearview mirror. The light was gone. Poof. Just like that. Was gasping into the phone, trying to explain what happened, but Lacey could barely understand me. My voice was shaking. My whole body was. I didn't stop driving until I pulled into her driveway. We sat in her living room for hours after that, trying to make sense of it. She thought maybe it was someone messing around, maybe a prank. But here's the thing that still bugs me. In the direction that person was walking, there's nothing. No trees, no cars, no fences to duck behind. Just a wide, flat sidewalk and a big old community mailbox. And I didn't see them leave. Did they vanish behind the mailbox? Did they crouch in the shadows? Did they just disappear even weirder? When we went back the next day to look, we found weird scuff marks on the sidewalk across from my driveway. Not shoe prints, just long, flat marks like something heavy had been dragged or something had stood in place and twisted a bit. And that light? It wasn't like anything I've ever seen. Too clean, too sharp. Almost like it wasn't from this world. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in my car again and glance in the side mirror, just to test myself. I never see anything, but I keep expecting that same white-blue light to come rising up again, smooth and slow, locking onto the mirror like it knows, like it remembers. And maybe one night, it will. Have you ever had one of those nights that just sticks with you? Not because it was fun or exciting, but because it left you with that weird, crawling feeling you can't shake no matter how much time passes? Yeah, this was one of those nights. This happened in the fall of 2022, right before Halloween. I was 14 and my cousin Jake had invited me and two of our friends, Emily and Marcus, for a weekend sleepover at his place. His house wasn't in the city like mine. It was way out in the middle of nowhere near this tiny town called Pine Hollow. Honestly, if you blinked while driving, you'd miss the entire town. Jake's house sat at the very end of a long gravel road surrounded by trees with only a couple of other houses scattered miles apart. His backyard stretched into this huge empty field, and beyond that, thick dark woods that looked like they went on forever. The kind of place that's quiet, too quiet sometimes. Jake's parents were heading to a family wedding that weekend and left early Saturday morning. They told us to behave and locked up. Some wine in the basement, like we were even interested in that. They'd be back Sunday night. It wasn't the first time we stayed there alone, and nothing weird had ever happened before. Saturday started off great. We played video games, made way too many nachos, and even built a fort in the living room because, yeah, we're not too old for that. Around 8 p.m., we decided to watch scary movies, mostly just to make fun of them. We had popcorn, sodas, all of us wrapped up in blankets. It was around 10:45 when things started getting off. We were halfway through this dumb ghost movie when the motion light in the backyard suddenly clicked on. It lit up the whole side of the yard, bright and harsh against the darkness. Jake's dog, a golden retriever named Max, perked up and let out this low growl. Not a bark, just this weird rumbly noise from his throat. I got up and peeked through the blinds. At first I didn't see anything. The yard looked empty. Just grass and trees. I figured it was a rabbit or something. Max calmed down a little, so we ignored it. But 10 minutes later, the light came on again. Now we were all paying attention. Emily muttered, "Maybe it's a deer." But her voice sounded uncertain. This time, Marcus looked too. Still nothing. Out there. Just the field and the start of the woods in the distance, but something felt off. The air felt heavier. Like that weird pressure you get before a thunderstorm. Then it happened a third time, only this time the light didn't shut off right away. It stayed on. "Guys," Jake said quietly, "that light's not supposed to stay on unless something's moving." We all got real quiet. Even the dog was frozen, ears up, eyes locked on the back door like he knew something was out there. Jake locked the doors, even the one to the garage that was always left open. We turned off the movie. None of us wanted to say it out loud, but we were spooked. About 20 minutes went by and we were just sitting there half whispering about whether we should call someone. Then we heard a noise from the backyard, a soft, crunching sound, like footsteps on dried leaves. Emily shushed us and pointed to the back window. We all moved over slowly and looked out. At first there was nothing, just trees, the edge of the field, and a whole lot of shadows. Then Jake whispered, "There." He pointed toward the tree line. Just beyond where the yard ended and the woods began, there was a figure. Someone was crouching low, half hidden behind a tree. I couldn't make out a face, just the shape. They were definitely watching us. Not moving, not speaking. Just crouched there like they were waiting. It was like something out of a nightmare. Jake grabbed his phone and went upstairs to call the police. He came back down a few minutes later, pale and tense. "They're sending someone," they said to stay inside and don't answer the door. We didn't argue. It felt like forever, but maybe 25 minutes later, we saw the flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the trees. A police SUV rolled into the driveway, and 2 officers stepped out, with flashlights. We watched them from the front window as they walked the yard, shining lights toward the trees. Then they circled to the side of the house where the motion light had gone off. 5 minutes later, someone knocked on the front door. One of the officers stood there, calm but serious. He said they didn't find anyone. Whoever had been out there was gone. They asked us what we saw, how long the person had been there, if we'd noticed any strange vehicles. But none of us had seen enough to give any real answers. Just a shadow behind a tree. The officer told us it was probably a hunter, or someone hiking through who got too close to the property. He said it wasn't anything to worry about, but to keep the doors locked and call again if anything else happened. After they left, we didn't go back to the movie. We just sat in the living room, lights on, talking quietly. Eventually we moved our stuff upstairs to Jake's room. Being on the second floor just felt safer. Max slept near the door, and every time he shifted or growled in his sleep, I jumped. The next morning, we tried to act like nothing had happened. Jake made eggs. Emily scrolled through her phone. But then I glanced out the kitchen window and froze. There were footprints. In the muddy patch near the back steps, right below the motion light, you could see them clear as day. Big boot prints. They led right up to the door, just a few, but the last one was inches from the handle. Jake opened the door slowly. The prints didn't go anywhere else, just toward the door. Whoever it was had walked up, stood there, and left. Or maybe they didn't leave right away. Marcus pointed to the side of the steps. There were drag marks, like someone had crouched or knelt there for a while. The mud was disturbed in this weird circular way, and right next to it, stuck in the side of the wooden step, was a fingernail. Yeah, a freaking nail. Not a whole one, just the tip. Like it got caught and broke off. We didn't talk much after that. Jake's parents came home that night and were super freaked out when we told them. His dad added a lock bar to the back door and installed a new motion camera. But none of that made me feel better. I haven't been back to Pine Hollow since. Jake says nothing else ever happened, but I'm not sure I believe that. You know how sometimes your brain tries to explain stuff away just to make you feel better? It's like, oh, it was probably a hunter or maybe just a prank. But deep down you know something wasn't right. Sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if we hadn't noticed the motion light that night? Or if we'd fallen asleep in the living room like we planned? I don't like to think about it too much. But every October, when the air gets colder and the nights come faster, I remember that shape by the trees, just standing there, watching, and I wonder if they ever left at all. This happened in the fall of 2018, back when I was 15. My cousin Eli invited me and 2 of our other friends, Zane and Mia, to stay over at his place for the weekend. His parents were out of town visiting relatives in Vermont, and the idea of having the whole house to ourselves felt like freedom. We weren't planning anything crazy, just games, snacks, and maybe a dumb horror movie or 2 to freak ourselves out. Eli lived in a quiet little town called Pine Brook, just outside of Albany, the kind of place where most people don't lock their doors until bedtime and everyone knows which dog belongs to which house. His street had big trees, wide lawns, and a lot of houses that hadn't changed much since the 70s. There was something old and creaky about it all, but in a cozy way, at least during the day. Eli's house sat near the end of a cul-de-sac. It was one of those two-story places with peeling white paint, overgrown hedges, and a porch light that buzzed when it turned on. Inside, it smelled faintly like cedar and old carpet. We set up in the living room, which had this huge front window looking out to the yard and the street beyond. You could see the shadows of passing cars stretch across the wall at night like slow, creeping fingers. We rolled out our sleeping bags on the floor and messed around for hours, eating junk food, playing this zombie shooter game until our eyes hurt, and making dumb jokes that got less funny the later it got. Around midnight, we shut off the game and just sat in the dark, talking. It had that eerie, late-night quiet where every sound seems louder and more important than it really is. That's when I got the idea. I told them I needed to grab something from my backpack, but really I was planning a prank. I was going to sneak outside, circle around to the big front window, and tap on the glass just hard enough to scare them. Maybe even do a creepy whisper or knock pattern for extra effect. I slipped on my sneakers, quietly unlatched the back door and stepped into the night. It was cold and damp, and everything felt still. Too still. The only sound was the crunch of my shoes on the gravel path and the rustle of leaves from a breeze I couldn't feel. I stayed low, moving along the edge of the house where the hedges were tall and untrimmed. The front yard came into view. I was just about to peek around the corner when I saw him. A man, standing completely still, only about 10 feet from the living room window. He wasn't moving. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there facing the glass, watching. At first, I thought maybe Zane or Eli had followed me and gotten there first. But no, this guy was bigger. He wore a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up, and I could barely make out his shape in the moonlight. I couldn't see his face, but the way he stood, rigid and wrong, froze me in place. He didn't belong here, and he wasn't one of us. He didn't tap the glass or try to scare anyone. He just stood there, like he was waiting. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know what to do. If I moved, he might hear me. If I stayed, he might come closer. Every instinct told me to run, but I was terrified that any sound would draw his attention. My prank had turned into something way darker, way creepier than I could have imagined. I started moving backward inch by inch, trying not to rustle the hedge too much. When I got to the side of the house, I bolted, ran through the backyard, like my life depended on it. I slipped back inside, locked the door behind me, and pressed my back against it, trying to stay calm. The others were still in the living room, laughing about something dumb Zane had said. They hadn't seen anything. I walked over, grabbed Eli's arm, and whispered, "There's someone outside." He thought I was still messing with them. I pointed to the front window. Eli got up, pulled the curtain aside, and looked. Nothing. The man was gone. "Dude, you're so full of it," he said with a grin, shaking his head, but I knew what I saw. We ended up dragging our sleeping bags into a tighter circle in the middle of the room. Not because we were scared, at least that's what we told ourselves, but just to be more comfortable. Nobody said much for a while. It felt like the air had changed, like something had passed through the room that none of us could name. Around 3 a.m., just when we were starting to drift off, we heard it. A low, dull thud, coming from the side of the house. We all went still. The room was dead silent except for the sound of our breathing. Then a soft scraping noise, like someone dragging their hand, or something else, along the siding. Slowly. Eli sat up and looked at me. I saw in his face what I'd been feeling all night. This wasn't a joke anymore. I got up, crouched low, and moved to the back door, still locked. I waited there in the dark, trying to listen, trying to breathe quietly. Every second felt like it stretched forever. I thought about the weak latch on the side gate. It didn't close all the way. If someone pushed hard enough, I crept back into the living room, held a finger to my lips, and motioned for everyone to stay quiet and get down. I grabbed Eli's phone from where it was charging and called 911. I whispered into the phone, barely able to keep my voice steady. There's someone outside. We don't know who he is. He's trying to get in. The operator stayed calm, asked me questions I could barely answer, and said an officer was already on the way. I thanked her and hung up. The waiting was the worst part. A few minutes later, we saw headlights through the front window. A patrol car. Relief rushed in, but only for a second. Another loud thud came from the side of the house, louder than before. Then a scuffling sound, and footsteps running through the gravel. The officer got out, flashlight in hand, and took off around the side of the house. We heard yelling, some kind of scuffle, and then silence. Finally, a knock at the door. "Pinebrook Police," a voice called. "It's safe to open up." The officer stepped inside and told us they'd caught a man trying to break in. He had a crowbar in one hand and a pair of thick gloves in his pocket. Said he was just looking for a place to sleep. But the officer didn't buy it. Not with how close he'd gotten to the house. Not with how long he'd been watching. They found footprints along the edge of the yard, all leading straight to the window, and then around the side, toward the back gate. Exactly where I'd seen him standing. He hadn't just passed through. He'd been waiting, watching, maybe even listening. The police took him away, but one officer stayed outside in a squad car until Eli's parents came home at dawn. By the time the sun came up, the world looked normal again. The living room was messy with empty soda cans and snack wrappers, the smell of stale popcorn in the air. But something had changed. Something we couldn't shake. For weeks I kept thinking about it. About how still he was. About how close I had been. About what might have happened if I hadn't come back inside. If I hadn't seen him at all. I still wonder what he wanted, and what would have happened if we hadn't called for help in time. All I know is that night in Pinebrook still makes my skin crawl. And sometimes, when I'm alone in a room with a big window, I catch myself glancing out, just to make sure no one's standing there watching, waiting.